How's it going, everyone? Welcome. Elvira Gonzalez here. Right now, you're gonna hear me is on this setup. Now we come back after there was a couple days where we didn't have any electricity. There was a major room power outage. So yeah, the cables here were too old, so this kind of departments and buildings they have like when Nixon was alive, right? When Nixon was running on on the house. So here in Argentina, they just do, most of this stuff or the maintain building operations and maintenance is something that is being handled when stuff happens. So because of that, well, luckily and now, fortunately, we already have with the other people involved, so for technicians and the homeowner and the tenants. Finally, well, we reach an agreement, so we can actually solve this in a week. So it could be fast, but in any case, the lesson from that is that you must have at least certain amount of money, always an emergency funds when stuff can go wrong, right? So, in any case, here we are now with React Native. And over the couple days, we have looked so far at how can we now is understanding the React Native value propositions, as well as the architecture and the inner mechanism and how the things work. So we dive into the React. What is React? What is the value proposition? What is the mechanism of React, at least in React 18? And be able to articulate all of these different phases, the three phases that React actually does when it comes to now render elements into the DOM, and describe that with a trigger, render, and commit phase, and then with something after that, which is when now the effects or the hooks happen. So for example, the use effects happen. So in the React Native apps, the point is that we want us to bring now these useful tools, but not only for writing is user elements on the web, but also for the native platforms, whether it's iOS and Mac, which is the same, but iOS and Android. Now, how they do that, right? By creating now this core feature, this React Native library, that what it does behind the scenes is to now let you write React elements into create user interface in React, and therefore now target is a specific native directive on any of these platforms, whether it's in Android, iOS, Windows, right? But the point of this is that at the end of the day, we want is to now reuse, or at least Facebook, because this was made by Facebook, to say, hey, React, which is something that they developed that internal tool, they come out with that, and now and they made open source in 2011, and 2 years later, React Native was open source. So let me see this React Native, right? React Native open source date. In 2013. All right. Okay. So React Native was in React. No. You're missing. Exactly. React was officially open source in 2013, and 2 years later, React Native was now open source by Facebook. So now, the value proposition of React Native is to say, hey, let's going to now have the ability to unify these two uh, workflows for the web and the mobile. So write once, run everywhere. Or this is a motto that is not exclusive for React. But with React Native is that, hey, we now provide you this library where the software developer peoples now are going to focus extremely on providing you now core features and functionality, so then you can figuring out how you can now not only build, maintain and deploy and monitoring your React Native apps. So because React only focus on these core features and functionality, which is something that we look at how can we do that, by using now is Expo, which is a very compelling way to write now React Native applications, since this is something the by de facto encouraged by the developers at React Native and also from their docs. So we look first at the Expo and understand that before Expo we have to set up our machines, and that's something that takes now, for example, 1 or 2 days to set up, right? So you need to actually set up the Xcode, install the Xcode tools, and then the Cocoa Pods, the Ruby version, particularly because the Xcode project is something that use Cocoa, which is written in Ruby. So Cocoa Pods is the package manager, but for Xcode project or for iPhone and iOS development, and because it uses Cocoa Pods and it is written in Ruby, so you need is a different Ruby version that macOS provide by default, and also how you can use some of these Ruby version managers. Homebrew is another one. This is more for users. Again, for simple users, where you don't need to actually work. You are not a developer in Ruby, right? So this is only to set up things is on iOS, and then on Android, then you need to install the proper JDK, right? Which is the JavaScript, the Java Development Kit. You may use is the JDK 17, and also you need to install is the proper Android Studio, as well as the specific Gradle tool. In other words, is this building process or this build program that now output is the APK, these binary files that are executable on the Android platform. So not only that, Fastline is the equivalent of Gradle, but Fastline is for iOS. You don't need to worry about that. But here in Android, you do, especially if you're new, if you inherit an older code base, right? So it ended up happening that once you set up that, and then you set up the iOS and also the Android, so you need to also use specify is the different path, the binary files that live. So anytime you run now a command, it will detect that, right? It will know the location to run that binary files. So once you have that, then now you can start your development in React Native apps, which means is, hey, now let's go to use now Metro and Watchman. So Watchman is this file system detection for change made by Facebook, and Metro, which is this bundler, where this is not a compiler, and it means that this bundler is say, hey, this is the entry point for the JavaScript applications, and then I'm going to create one single JavaScript files with all of the that contains all the code and all the dependencies around it, and then I'm going to generate this one single file. So this, what it does is to improve the initial page load time, or the initial screen. So it's important to describe what are the building tools and setup tools that we need to know before Expo, and now how Expo provide all of this out of the box, so we don't have to worry about it. So, and also provide some sort of sandbox, like the Expo Go, where you can now create your applications right out of the box. This is not meant for development or for enterprise development, but it's just to get your hands dirty and understand now how all of these things start to work. So in any case, so with Expo, we look so far in this course that it helps us to automate all of those very tedious stuff that happens behind the scenes, especially to make your environment ready for iOS and Android, all right? And then provide you now out of the box some of the common tools that you are going to do, and they are relevant for your development, such as the linter, the plugins that you can add to your development with NPM, for example, as well as the routing and navigations. First, we'll look at how can we use the most common React components, or in this case, React Native components. So for example, like text, view, scroll view, flat list, right? So we can have a sense of how we can do that, and also what's happening behind the scenes, especially when anytime you use one of these particularly components from React Native, is doing behind the scenes. So anytime you use, for example, view or text, and then you define is the style in a React component, like in other words, in a JavaScript function style, but now the React Native style, you can now, or there is a question here, is like how the things work, right? So because now this code, the React Native code, which is at the end of the day is just a JavaScript functions, right? It's JavaScript, right? So this code now is going to pass through several of these phases that is made up by the render. Now we're currently using is the Fabric, which is the rendering for that, right? So for example, you take a look at this, so for the iOS to understand now, this is the structure that it needs to render, similar with the counter and all that kind of stuff. I don't know why the counter did. Okay, it works. All of this kind of stuff. So in order for this to be rendered on the device, whether it's on a simulator or on a physical device, it needs to pass through several steps or phases, and that is the Fabric, the rendering system. So this rendering system is made of 3 phases, similar to React, right? So first you have now the render, where it's going to evaluate is the React components. So for example, like this, it's going to evaluate the wait a second moment. Integration testing, enterprise UI development task. Okay, here we are. Okay. Yeah, there we are. Oops, not this one. React Native. Is this one? Yeah, there you go. So so what it's gonna do is to let's go for a more simple page like this, like an idea, right? So what it's gonna do behind the scene is that you are now taking this native components or this models from React Native, all right? And when it now render this, let me actually is now take a look at this and say render, right? Render, commit, and mount. The fabric here. Follow me along here. This one. So here, this document refers to the new architecture that is active rollout, right? So this is the phases. The React Native render goes through a sequence of works to render React logic to a host platform, right? So this sequence of render from the React logic, from React logic to a host view or to a host platform code, right? So the platform embedding React Native, right? So this work sequence of words to render React logic to a host platform, okay? And this sequence of words is called the render pipeline. So this pipeline that takes now first on the initial screen is, or it takes now is the React execute this function. So it rendered that to create now the React element tree in JavaScript, and the React element tree is created in JavaScript and consists of React elements. So this is just a plain JavaScript object that describes what should appear on the screen. It includes props, styles, and children's. And React element only exists in JavaScript and can be represented instantiation of either React Composite components or React host component. But the point of this is that this now represents how this is gonna look like, all right? What should appear on the screen in a JSON, right? In a JavaScript object notation, and it can represent instantiation of either React Composing or React Host. So, but on the first phase of this pipeline, so which take is all of this code, all right, and then it render that and create now the React element tree in JavaScript, and from this tree data structure is then going to create now is the React element shadow or the React shadow tree in C++. This React shadow tree is created by the Fabric rendering and consists of React shadow nodes. A React shadow node is an object that represents a React host component to be mounted. So this output, this React shadow tree, it contains now the the C++ representation of the host components to be mounted, or the React host components to be mounted. So in other words, if we go back to our example here, hey, after it render that and after it create the React element tree, then it has this then it have now the render, the Fabric is now generates the React element tree, okay. So now the Fabric takes this, so now Fabric take this React element tree, okay, and then now create based on this information in JavaScript, and then creates this shadow tree that is indicating that represent is the React host components to be mounted, and it contains props that originate from JavaScript. They also contains layout informations in before Fabric. This exists in the mobile runtime heap, but this is quite interesting because once this React shadow tree is generated based on the React element tree, which is output by the which is when it's the React when React is executing the logic, it creates now this tree, and this tree is used to render or to be created from the. So the TLDR is that in this pipeline, right, you have three phases. You have the render. On the render, this is what is evaluated the React JavaScript logic, and they create the React element tree, which is a plain JavaScript object that contains how the thing's gonna look like. So what is the thing that it needs to be shown on the screen, and then now the Fabric takes that and generates this React shadow tree that contains or that represents is the React host components to be mounted, which contain now the layout and the position of these elements. And this is something that is calculated is by Yoga. Again, another component here. So on the commit, which is what happened after the React shadow tree is fully created. So now it knows what is the elements to be mounted. Okay, so this promotes both the React element tree and the newly created shadow tree as the next tree to be mounted, as the next set of elements to be mounted. And this also schedules calculation in its layouts. So once that is done on the commit phase here, all right, then the React mount that contains all the necessary informations about its layout is now transformed into a host view tree. This is quite interesting of this is what they call pipelines, because it transforms that into something until you get the end goal of all of this. This is quite interesting, powerful model. All of these phases or the phases of render pipeline may occur in different threads, right? So that's why we look at the threading model. So you have now the UI threads where only the host. This is when now you can manipulate its host view components and the JavaScript, which is used by rendering by rendering logic and calculating the layout and that kind of stuff. But this is the two thread that are now is running inside of your emulator. In our case, this emulator. So that's quite interesting. That is huge, my friend. That is huge. That is huge. Because with this simple view of the idea, for example here, in this simple view, all of the stuff that is happening to be rendered here. So you can actually have this kind of stuff. And this is quite powerful because not only that we are able to see how can we use this basic React Native components, but also is more advanced features. So for example is to now work with text inputs, how you can now display different scrolling, how you can now show different elements. If you want to show a finite set of elements, how would you like to use scroll view? If you need to render a huge collection of elements, you might want to use is flat list. I think the name is flat list. Yeah, flat list. But before that, we look at first. We saw first is the navigations. So in the navigations, as a way to actually create all of these different views, uh, using now the file-based way of defining routes inside of the app, which is a great stuff. Uh, which is also using is the same model of the Next.js, which is a great stuff, which is cool. By the way, and then explore and understand now how can we work with that. This is one of the convenient stuff of Expo, because now it used behind the scenes is this React Native navigation community package, but now it provides a wrapper from that, so we can now use that in this more compelling way of creating applications, right? So here you can explore and define all of this file here, right? Where you have, hey, I want you to define is this different routes here, and this will be now the layout that you want to show, as well as the content, and how you can have here on like the web several navigations. So for example, like stack, tabs, and models. And by doing this, we were able to, for example, in the counter, actually now add a stacking navigation for that. And using now tabs to indicate how this is going to look like, which is great, right? For diving into the navigation and all that kind of stuff, this is something that go beyond the scope of today's video, but it's important at least to understand where all of these things are coming from. So now, once we explore how can we create these nested navigations, we now look at these most common applications or most common user interfaces, like the text, scroll view, flat list, and what are the main use cases, right? So text input is for common user inputs. Unlike the web, you don't have any form, but here you have this text input, which is great. And if you want to render now finite set of elements, you use is scroll view. And unlike the web, where you add in more and more elements, it actually provides you now this auto scrolling detection mechanism. But here we have explicitly to tell that to the platform. And if you need to render a huge collection of data, it is more useful to go with flat lists, which is part of this virtualizations component, which the TLDR is that is using some technique called sliding window, which is a programming technique that help you to now is deal with the large collections. But in other words, by showing it a small finite set of elements in the view on the visible area, and ignore or how do you put it? I think I made it here. Yeah, I don't think I actually take notes of that. So, but in any case, the idea of using a flat list, unlike rendering, is with mapping functions. In React Native ecosystem, you use now a specific component for that, which is flat list, which is using this virtualization techniques to now show elements in the visible areas so it only renders elements on the visible area, and exactly. So it works by tracking elements in the visible area and some small set of elements on top and the bottom, and doesn't render items way off the specific area or the render area, right? So this is quite interesting if we dive deep of how the things actually works behind the scenes. So we have now a more approach, a more technical approach of how the things actually works, and some of the most convenient functions that we can work with. Again, this is something that goes beyond the scope of today's video. I'm just doing a quick recap of how do we get here, and some of the use cases for using flat lists and doesn't. In other words, remember, if you want to render now data from the server or huge data sets, this is when you use. And now some of the user enhancement or user experience enhancements. One of them is the tapping, okay, or toggling items using now pressable, okay, which can be quite silly to do that, but it's actually quite interesting. So you have now this user experience enhancements, so the delete and toggle items here. So to provide UI, we can use this pressable, again, to enhance the user experience, whether it's providing you now specific mobile user experience, tap or tap, double tap, and all that kind of stuff. Also, how can we now order and sorting? Here we are sorting is based on a specific property, for example, like create timestamp, and sorting all of these elements using the sort JavaScript built-in functions, which is great for sorting numbers. And there is a rule of thumbs that if you want to now render is ascending elements, you want is to return is now a positive value based on the comparison function, which means is that the second element is or if B is minus A, so now it's going to sort them in an ascending order, or if the second item minus the first item give you a positive value, it will give you now an ascending order. This is, if correct me if I right. Let me go with claw, which is here. So correct me if I'm wrong. With the sort function in JavaScript, bypassing a compare function, okay? So by passing a compare function, it is by passing a compare function, it is safe to say that if the second item minus the first item is positive, it will give you an ascending order sorted collection. Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When the return functions when the return functions return a positive numbers, okay. When the return function returns a positive number, the second element comes before A. It means it is descending order. Subtle nuance here. Okay. All right. So if the compare function return a positive number, it means that the okay. Exactly. Whatever the comparison function return a positive number, so the second elements come before the b. It means it gives you now an ascending it means that a descending order. Okay. Descending order. The key is to remember that a positive result means swap the elements, while negative result means keep the order. Oh. Positive result, swap the elements. And negative is keep the order. If the result gives you a negative, keep the order. If this is positive, swap the order, or give you now descending order. All right, so we look at that. We explore that a little bit of JavaScript because it's just as a way to understand how the things work and be able to describe that. So, for example, now if I don't lose my mind, okay, if we have now a collection of values like this and here, right? And if I do sort, and if I pass now a compare function which takes now the first item and the second item, and whatever value you get here, all right, if this is a positive number, okay, if this is a positive number, swap order. If this is a negative, keep the same order. But in any case, if the second item is minus the first items, if this gives you now a negative value here, it means that it's going to sort in an ascending order, a descending order. Okay, so for example, if the first element in this is the second elements minus the first elements give you a positive value, or in other words, what is the value that you're getting here? If this positive, swap the order. If this, in this case, is negative, so in other words, it's going to sort this in a descending order. So in other words, we're going to put now 1, 2 in an ascending order. So you are wrong. No, in a descending order. Exactly. No, it's okay. It's okay. In a descending order. In a descending order from greater to minus. Exactly. In a descending order. All right. In a descending order. Yes. So yeah, you're actually right. You're totally right. Okay. So yeah, we explored that a little bit just to understand how the things actually working behind the scenes and what is the stuff that we're gonna pass through. But in any case, then we move on to data persisting and layouts. So if you want to store data persistently here, there is a particular package called async storage that we create now a folder for that to actually is now, well, store stuff using is this asynchronous unencrypted key value storage, pretty much like local storage, but here is we're using is this community package. Initially was developed as part of the core team, but they move out and it turns into a community library, so it can be built and developed and managed independently of the React Native core team. So that's quite interesting. So this is data persistent, and the other is the layout animation, right? And how here we have now some of these convenient layout animation that are provided by React Native, but it animate is how the elements are rendering there. So it animate is the specific UI so it animate is the UI from previous state to the current one. So if you now require more custom-based hook animations, you now rely on Reanimate for that. So this is great because here you have now custom animations with Reanimate and gesture handler. And now for what we really care, which is device interactions, haptics, push notifications, and schedule notifications. So, Jesus, that was 40 minutes to explain that, right? Yeah, that was 40 minutes to explain that. Well, so this device interactions, which is very specific to the which is very specific to the device like React Native, right? They're very narrow specific to that. So you have this device interactions like haptics, which is for these touchable interactions that you can provide to the users, these touchable feedbacks. So for example, like vibration, right? All right. Yeah, like vibrations. And the other is yeah, let me make a quick pause here. All right, and as you can see, we are in a different setup, an outfit right now. A day has passed, so based on all the things that I have mentioned before in that quick overview of React Native, what is the value proposition of each one of them, as well as the inner mechanism, how that things work, and what is doing behind the scenes. And every time that you, for example, write now a React component, which is a JavaScript function, what is the things doing behind the scenes, especially with React and React Native. So also we went through describing how is this particular course, which is, let me show you here. And, exactly. This particular course taught by Kathy Kraman. She was a software engineer at Formidable, a creative agency that now she ended up being a director of engineering, and now she's currently at Expo, this framework around React Native. So because of that, and then we went through how to set up things here. We're not going to dive deep into the details, but how can we now set up things with Expo? What is the value proposition of Expo, especially for improving the developer experience and all the different phases to develop, build, and monitoring our app. So far we have looked at the develop, and what are the things that we can do, especially to help us to cover some of the common problems that we can face, right? So for example, it's like having a linter, using TypeScript, this is static analysis, and how can we create our React Native component? What is the anatomy of this React Native? And how can we use now the most common components from React Native? The target is native specific platforms such as Vue, text, and also the navigation, how different is unlike the web. And here we have three types of navigation. We have the stack, modals, and tabs. right now, as you can see here in this mobile phone, we have is the tab navigation, right? And inside of this, we have the stack navigation. And how can we now create this stacking navigation? And what and how this navigation mechanism work behind the scenes? This is something that we're going to describe that in the other courses, specifically the intermediate React Native, as a way to now dive deep into that topic on the uh, a dive deep into the navigation, advanced UI techniques, as well as the development build, right? Because that's the entire pipeline of doing all of this. And also look at how can we now is use another most common components such as text input, and how we can use is the keyword that is showing us. So the text input as well as the property, and how can we bind that to this using React. So text input, scroll view, when you want to define a finite set of elements you want to render, and now flat list for especially when you want to render large collections of data, right? A huge data sets. So for example, data that come from the server. And this works by using is a particular technique, which is lighting window, specifically the virtualization technique, would say, hey, that is going to keep track of the visible, it's going to keep track elements on the visible area, and some of the top, and some elements on the top and the bottom, and it doesn't render elements way off the render fade, the renders area. So we also look at how the things work by rendering is this amount of elements. We also have a more practical approach of how can we even ourselves create thousands of elements in JavaScript as a way to recap that. And then now, how can we use is the or how can we enhance the user experience? In other words, is by looking at how can we now is create is toggles, right? How can we now sorting and listing elements, or sorting and searching elements here, using now is the built-in sort methods. So if you want to compare now with date or numbers, how actually that works that behind the scenes. So the TLDR of this compare function is just you pass now the first and the second elements, and the result of that, if that is positive, it will gonna sort that in a ascending order, right? If this is negative, in an ascending order. In other words, if this is positive, it will change, it will swap orders. If it's negative, it will remain the same. Now, and then the which is what is relevant in today's video here, we also look at the data persistence and layout. So again, a very specific component that now React Native exposed to us. This initially was made to be the core, or this was developed initially as part of the React Native core, but as part of now to move on and delegate this functionality to the community, and they did that, and now this is something that we can use, and the community actually can now participate into that. So this async storage, right, is something that well, it gives us the ability to, as the name suggests, so store persisting unencrypted in an async fashion way data. We also look at how can we do that by defining the storage file. And when you want to store that data, uh, or to consume that, how do you then going to get that data out of that? So for example, in our effect, this is how we get that data uh, for that. Let me see if I can show you this. There you get it, right? Mm-hmm. Here in this particular piece of code, this is when we now fetch is our data. And because, well, this so React fetch so if you want to interact with external systems, so for example servers, DOM elements, uh, reading or storing values in the local storage, this particular hooks allow you to interact with these different external systems. And because we cannot use is an async inside of our effect, this is not part of the hook. A common trick is that, hey, let's go to define now an async function inside of the effect or inside of our hook, and then now runs that, right? And this is how we now update the state so we can actually get this data as expected. So far so good, right? Because as we look at that, and also the layout animations, and which is something that it provides you by default to animate from one state to another state, or from the previous state to a current one, right? But it does that unlike, so this layout animations, you don't have control of how it animates them because it is very platform specific. However, if you want to now have or define your custom hooks based animations, you can go with Reanimate for that. Reanimate or Gesture Handler. Again, this is some popular libraries for doing that. So finally, what we really care in today's video is the device interactions. So haptics, as well as the push notifications and schedule notification, is something that we are going to dive deep here. So we look at haptics, which is this library relevant to device vibrations, to provide some vibrations or tactile, to provide tactile feedback, right? Here we can use these two particular methods on impact async or notification async. This is something that you can have more stronger feedback or not. But in any case, after that, we went through now look at the push notification here and how you have two type of notifications, which is this is our integral part of your mobile development or your application development, and it is triggered by your app when it is not in the foreground usually, right? Mm-hmm. So if we have remote notifications, local notifications. So remote notification is that they send from the server, so the server somehow knows the device push notification and send a notification like an Apple or to Firebase, and it get redirect to your it's it's because somehow with this remote notification they keep track, they know the device push notifications and send a push notification to or Apple or Firebase, and then from there it gets redirects to your device. This is something that we can look at the So this is something that we can look and explore is here. And that is, yeah, let's get into this. So push notification, or remote push notification, expo push notification. Yeah, what you need to know about notification, right? And so that you get this. Remember that Expo Notification supports build on top of native functionality provided by Android and iOS. The same content and behaviors from native platform apply to Expo apps. If you're unsure about this specific notification feature, see each platform official documentation. So, we got is this remote and local notification, push notification, also called remote notification. Notification that are sent to a user device from a remote server, and the in-app notification that are created and displayed from within the app. Since many of the API that created, let me see if you can actually look that right. You are looking at this, which is great. So Expo notifications support both push and local notifications. So you must use a development build to use push notifications since they are not supported in Expo Go. Okay. The rest of this guide focus on push notification. Support both push and okay. Okay. So the rest of this guide focus on push notifications. Push notifications delivery. And this is interesting that they mention that. So push notification and local notifications, or aka remote notifications. This terminology is quite interesting. Remote notification or push notification, or local notification, or app in, or in-app, in-app, right? In-app notifications and push notifications. Okay. So, once we know this subtle difference, right? That is a notification that is sent by the user device from a remote server, and that remote server somehow knows the push notifications device. Knows the device push notifications ID and sends that to Apple or iOS. That from there is redirect to the to your device. Again, this is the TLDR of what Katty Kramer mentioned. Okay. So, and the other is local notification, which is notification that are scheduled notification or notification that are created from within your app. Since many of the API that create this notification will create then a particular time, they may also sometimes be called scheduled notification, which is also an example of how can we create this this feature. So, because push notification by in itself is require a particular course, right? We are going to explore that, and in fact, we're just going to look at how can we create this schedule notification.
A really integral part of mobile applications is push notifications. So a push notification, I mean, we all receive them, probably too many, but it's the notification that you get in your notification bar from your application. It's triggered by the application when it's not in the foreground, usually. And there's two types of push notifications. There's remote notifications. So these are sent from a server. So a server somewhere knows your device's push notification, and it sends the push notification to like Apple or to Firebase, and it gets directed to your device.
And gets directed
Or
to your device.
local notifications, which are scheduled within your app and sent to the current device only. Setting up remote push notifications is quite involved. I've linked to some documentations on how to do it, but basically there's that you need to set up a server, you need to register and save the push token.
Exactly. You need to, but essentially is that you need to set up a server, you need to register and save the push token, at least to get a, okay. But at least to have a huge overview of that, all right, is to that you need to, okay. So remote or push notifications. So push notifications.
I've linked to some documentations on how to do it, but basically there's that you need to set up a server, you need to register and save the push token.
Mm-hmm. So push notifications is quite involved. Exactly. So push notification is quite involved since you need to set up a server, okay, and register and save the push token, register and register okay, you need to register and save the push token. This is how you can identify this particular device.
So it is not it is not easily workshopable.
Mm-hmm. So you need to set up a server, register and save the push token. Exactly. Use a third-party service to help you redirect your token to the proper device. Apple or Firebase. But that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. It's like, oh, it's here. How we going to know is the fine is this push notifications. Or yeah, because it's quite involved and all that kind of stuff, there is no problem to do that. But in any case, yeah, here we are.
You need to register and save this to ourselves. To do this, let's install extra.
So we're gonna now is we're going with local notification. Yeah, we're going with local notifications. So for that, okay, we're going with local notifications. Expert notifications support both push and local notification. And you must use development build to use push notifications since they are not supported in Expo Go. So we can install is this. So here is focus on push notifications. Like, okay, makes a lot of sense. Makes a ton of sense. Android, FCM, send notification with that. Handle incoming notifications. But all of this is because it's now focused on that. Learn how to respond to a notification received by your app and take actions based on the event. Assorted integration and troubleshooting. That's quite interesting. This is for push notification, but what if I want to say is local notification? Present a local in-app notification to the user. But how you gonna show that? Oh, okay. A notification, but this is from the reference, not the guides. Okay. And here we are. Present a local in-app notifications to the user. So it means that we need to install this. All right. Okay. So this is now app or in-app notification. Right. You get this one. There you got it. All right. You got in-app notification for that. In-app notification, and there you got it. Okay, this is the Expo Docs. In-app notifications provide an API to fetch push notification tokens and to present, schedule, receive, and response notification. To push notification tokens. Push notification, remote notification functionality provided by Expo notification will be unavailable in Expo Go from SDK 53. A development build will be required to use push notification. A development build. Introduction to development build. Okay. Again, this go beyond the scope, but local notification in app notification will remain available in Expo Go. Oh, but okay, in Expo Go. So, schedule a one-off notification for a specific date or some time from now. A schedule a notification repeating in some time interval or a calendar date match on iOS. Get and set the application badge icon number. Obtain a native device push notification so you can send push notification with FCM for Android and APN for iOS. Obtain an Expo push token so you can send push notification with Expo push server. Listen to incoming notification in the foreground and the background. Listen to interaction with notifications. Handle imperative. Create, update, and delete Android notification channels, because this is how you handle that in Android. And set custom icons and color for notifications on Android. Okay, so this is how you use this, right? A very simple, straightforward here. npm expo install notification. So that's what it is. Let's get into this.
And Expo device.
An Expo device. So this is how you can register is your notification. So if the platform is Android, you want to use this. You want to now add that to a channel. Notification listener and response listener. Okay. Async function schedule push notification. Okay, so anytime you call that, you're gonna push that. And function register for push notification. So this is a register for push notification. Whether it's on the platform is Android, you need to register that into a notification channel. If the device is a device to actually check that. That's quite interesting. From Expo device, egg notifications. Okay. So if the device is a device, it's interesting that it's asked that question. If it is, must use physical device for push notification. Because you can emulate push notification here. That's interesting. Okay, so on the emulator you can present a local in-app notification to the user. But this is for what? This is for push notification. What if you want to do is local notification? Present a local in-app notification to the user. And handle push notification with navigation. And part of the configuration. So let's go into this. I present a local in-app notification to the user, like this, using the notification. And this is now setting up a push notification. Notification listener, response listener. Again, because here we are going to notification channel. Okay, use ref notification event subscription, blah 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 blah. Device expo notifications, text view button platform, React Native. Okay, and it's because of that that we're gonna use notification to say, hey, if this is an iOS, Android, subscribe to that. And the listener here, notification listener and response listener. Both of things are reference to that. This use ref is something that you can use for targeting specific elements. All right, it's for targeted specific elements here. The use ref is to target specific elements here. Or when you want to hold a reference, when you want to keep track of the reference all outside of the rendering. Because with hooks you can keep track of the state on the UI. But with useRef is when you want to keep track of states outside of the rendering. For example, scrolling, or focus the input of a button, or focus the input of a text. Okay, now because of this, here what you're doing is to add notification receive listener and add notification response receive listener. That makes a lot of sense. And then for the cleanup function, you say, hey, I want to now remove those listeners, or in other words, is to say, get a new version out of this, or forget that, ditch that data. This cleanup function, ditch that and get a new one. Wherever you have that, remove it, and now generate a new one. Holy moly. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Let's get into this. This is gonna be wild. Okay. Yeah, this is gonna be wild, bro. All right. Let's get into this. Device interactions. Git status. Nothing on the branch. All right. Yeah, device interactions. So git log. Okay. And now, this is not push notification. Because here, we are about to now
Now, a
run.
concept that we haven't covered before is asking
Mm-hmm. Mm-mm-mm-mm-mm. Okay. So, so here we're gonna need to install is this an expo device. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Exactly. So before we can send any push notification, we need to ask permission, and let add a little utility for this. This will check if the user has granted push permission already, and if it's not, request it. Starting from Android 8.0, all notification must be assigned to a channel. Also, on Android 13, app user must opt in to receive notification via permission prompt that is automatically triggered by the operating system. This prompt will not appear until at least one notification channel is created, which is why we need to register a channel on Android. So to show this prompt to the user, at least in Android, you need to create is now a channel for Android here. A channel for Android. Starting from Android 8.0. Makes a lot of sense. You can only ask once, right? So know that you can only ask for push permission once, and for the calls request, this will not do anything. If you accidentally reject push notification permission, you will have to uninstall and reinstall the app to get promoted again. Alternatively, go to setting notification, Expo Go, and manually toggle on the notification permission. And this is it. Update account counter index, DSX. What it does is just to update this, notify us in 5 seconds for that. So yeah, he just is add the particular style to this and some of this notification that is showing here for this, right? You say, hey, you define a on the same function. On the same function here, right? And then you say text view style sheet touchable opacity from React Native, and then you add that. So you register for push notification this particular function, which is going to check if this is a device then you can now show that. And then you handle the notification. A notification from your app. A notification from your app. So let's get into this. Let's get into this.
Both. I've linked to some documentations, or it is any push notification. That's worth noting is that you can only ask them as a developer. You can only ask them once. So once you send a push, like an alert, native alert with the can we send you push notifications, and the user says no, you can't, then you can't ask again. The only way for the user to toggle the setting back to on would be to go to settings. So to ask for permission, we're going to add a little utility, and feel free to copy this function. So we'll copy this to utils register push notifications async.
Utility.
So this will be
Since
in here.
On Android 8 to
Utils
show a
new
prompt
file register for push notifications async.ts.
asking for permission.
Okay, and feel free to copy this.
Permission. You need to register in a channel.
Alright, so what does this do? What does this do? This is a convenience function, and basically, before you schedule a notification, you need to check whether you can actually send it. So the important part of this entire function is this line, so it's actually this line, to request permission from the user. And this is the bit that makes the native prompt actually show up when the user does.
But again, all of this piece of code is something that you can find here, not on the push notification, but on the, here on the push notification here, to say, hey, this is if you want to get a token for this. But in our case, it's not. This is if you want to request permission, fail to get push notification per push notification alert. Learn more about Project ID. This is when you're doing this push notification. So you can remove all of this, okay? Only to generate is now a push notification without it. Must use physical device for push notification. So from their docs here, she create now these utility functions that allow us to actually check is for the so to register is the push notifications in Android, and then what is really relevant into this function is this notification request permission async, and you can only ask permission is once. So let's get into this, right? So let's get into this. All right. Now, what does it mean is that on the util register for push notification async, we say touch util. There's no util folder. Bullshit. I don't have any util folder. What? I don't have a util folder. What? Anyway. What? Okay. Make dir. Okay, make dir. Utils. Right. Make dir utils and touch utils with the name of register for push notification async as a TypeScript file. So when I go to register push notification and then I paste this, what I'm pasting here is now the instructions to register push notifications on our Android device, right? So where you need to create is a channel here, okay, and this is vibration padding and all that kind of stuff, and then you're going to ask for permissions here.
So all we're doing here is we're checking whether we're on a device, because push notifications don't work on simulators. And do they work on emulators? They definitely don't work on simulators, so I can't use this iOS simulator.
Mm-hmm.
Then we check what the existing permission status is. So the status, do we have all the statuses listed here? But it can be, I don't have this, but it can be granted, denied, undecided, I think. Let me see if there's actually permission status. There we go. Granted, undetermined, and denied. So undetermined means that we've never asked, the user has never been asked. Granted means that they've been asked and they said yes, and denied means that they've been asked and they said no. So if the permission status is denied, and then you call this request permission async, so this is what makes the permission pop-up show up, it's actually a no off, it doesn't do anything. Whereas if you do granted, it also doesn't do anything, so the only time it has any effect is when the permission status is undetermined. And the reason that this is actually needed is that as of like a latest version of Android, so push notifications on Android work a little bit differently. They are tied to a channel. Android users will probably know what I mean more than I know what I mean. So there's different channels, so you can group notifications from the same app to a channel. And
so you can group
from the latest version of Android, you need to set up a channel before you ask for permissions. Otherwise, like it doesn't work. So that's why this code is here. Okay, so what we're going to do is in our counter app here, we're going to add a button. So let's go to the counter screen. So it should be an up, counter, and index. And let's render a little button here. So we want a touchable opacity with some text. And the text should say request permission. Alright, and let's give it some style. So let's do style button. And we'll make the same black button that we had before. Should have probably saved it, but we didn't, so we get to create it again. So background color, we'll do a theme color black. Give some padding, and give it a border radius. Border radius 6. And let's do a button text. So this will be used by the text element here. So style equals styles button text. Okay, so currently we just have a black button, so we need to make sure that this is text is white. So we want to do a color.
Yeah, but what you're doing here is like, now understand why we create this, all right? And also the storage here, so we can actually use the async storage for that, right? And when it comes to now create this notification here, container, yeah, the push, this is not push notification, this is
theme color white.
Well, this is a description of push notification, but the reality is that this is an in-app notification. Yeah, the reality is that in-app notification. So if we go to where, to the idea, another counter. Okay, so on the counter we say So on the counter, request permission is on the counter. Counter screen, but this is not counter screen. So on counter screen here, all right, we're going to now
Radius.
is add the request permission.
Radius 6.
Oh, it's a bottom
And
here.
let's do a and give it
Okay, to create now a bottom here. So there is no longer a counter here. We're gonna use now touchable opacity. Okay, this directive that behind the scenes what it do. Yeah. So what it's gonna do behind the scene is to, hey, this is the directive that I want to use. When these components get rendered, it will now create in JavaScript the render the React logic. It now, so when I hit here, let me actually do that. But let me define something here first, and then describe what's going on. So touchable opacity here is this one. We say style. Say style. Equal here. That'll be is the style bottom, but we haven't defined that style that bottom. So this is style that bottom, where the content will be now is a text, right? All content must be wrapped into a tag, in this case a text, where you say request permission, okay? So right now I'm using is two different native or two different UI elements provided by React Native. And let's now define here is, so to get rid of this, or we can also use that.
border radius 6.
Right. So it's going to define now the bottom style here as a key value here. Not sure what is the style that you want to add there. Background color. So say background color. You can access to the theme. Who made this? Theme color black. Please import that theme color black. Padding 12 and border radius. Padding in all aspect. Padding 12. Here this is not pixels or VMs or view width or view heights or percentage. No, this is specific unit for Android or iOS device. You can know more about that by using is the pixel so for example here you can say is, hey, I want to know what is the pixel ratio. Again, this is something that is provided by React Native, because you are going to render this different elements is on specific hardware, right? So say get this is a number, or you can say get font scale, right? In our case we can say is that get, right? Oh, this is more like, this is ESLint. So pixel ratio, so we're going to see what is that. In border radius.
And
So
let's do a button
border
text.
radius.
This will be used by the text element here. So style equals styles button text.
Using is now 6. Then you define is the button text. Just button text here. There you got it.
A button text. This will be used by the text element here. So style equals styles button text.
So this will be now say, hey, style. This is now
Okay, so currently we just have a black button, so we need to make sure that this is text is white. So we want to do a color or theme color white.
White, exactly.
So it shows up. Okay. Let's do a font weight
So color
of bold.
of theme color white.
Text transform.
In font weight bold. Say font weight bold. Of course, bold. So you want to add what? So text transform.
Uppercase.
Okay, and then you say text transform to capitalize or uppercase? Uppercase? Okay. So uppercase. Thing is linked for the auto completion in TypeScript.
And don't need this one size. But we do want to have a letter spacing of 1.
Okay. So we want to have now is a letter spacing of 1.
Lovely. Actually, one thing I wanted to show you, this came up with someone else. So font weight needs to be a string. So interestingly, on this iOS simulator it's fine, but on an Android phone, when we're testing this, like passing in font weight as a number actually crashed the app, so that was quite interesting. So font weight bold. Okay, so now we have our button, and
So now that we have defined all of this set of instructions here, okay, y counter, okay. So now that we define all of this instruction here, and the idea here is to explain what's going on, what will happen behind the scenes. Let's go to here. So once we define this set of instructions here that actually doesn't match to here because we don't have any counter, but this is the page here. So behind the scenes, what it's gonna do is when we hit enter, it's gonna pass through the rendering pipeline with Fabric, which is first is going to create now the React element tree in JavaScript. So it renders the render logic, it create that render tree, which is a plain JavaScript object that contains data that contains what this page would look like. Let me actually Fabric, like so. Say Fabric here. Render commit. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so it describes what should appear on the screen. Okay, so this code that is gonna be, once it is evaluating here, first you're gonna say, hey, let me now render this function, okay? And if I find any of these React Native components, I'm gonna of course call that and get that. So I'm going to create now the React element tree in JavaScript, which is a plain JavaScript objects that contains props, event handlers, and describe what should appear on the screen, what should appear here on this device, right? On this device. So, with that, once it creates that, the fabric, which is part of the first stage of the pipeline, on the render, is going to now take that React element tree and transform into a React shadow tree, which is the React shadow tree, which now this object represent is a React host component to be mounted, right? And it contains prop from JavaScript and also contains layer information about the dimensions and the position. In Fabric, React Shadow Nodes object exists in C++. So this object that contains now how that represents the React host component to be mounted, that also have is props from JavaScript and the layer information, which is the position and the dimension, pretty much like the reflow phase, where in the browser it needs to know what is the position and what is calculated the position and the dimension of the elements, right, during the reflow phase. So this is pretty much like now on the React Shadow tree. So this is this object is a C++ object. So before Fabric, they exist in the mobile runtime heap. Interesting. In the mobile runtime heap. Overview of memory management here. Observation on the Strep app desk. Use paging and memory mapping. Is a segment of virtual memory that has been assigned a direct byte for byte correlation with some portion of a file or file-like resource. This resource is typically a file that is physically present on disk, but can also be a device shared memory object or other resource that an operating system can reference through a file descriptor. Once present, this correlation between the file and the memory space permits application to treat the map portion as if it were primary memory. Memory map file. Paging or swapping. memory management unit or memory protection unit. Mhm. Okay. But in other words, this was handled by the mobile runtime heap. And the mobile runtime heap, mhm, the mobile runtime heap mhm. This okay. How Android manage processes and memory allocation here. Process and memory allocation here. Mhm. Because this machine is actually allocated. Okay. So, instead of using now the Android or the runtime, the mobile runtime heap, okay, which is taking care of the processes and memory allocation, now Fabric is generate this React Shadow element or these objects in C++ that represents now property that represent is now the React host components to be mounted on the device, right? So once it knows that, all right, so once it promotes this React element tree and the React shadow tree to be the next tree to be mounted, then on the mount phase, and also here on the committees where the layout calculation is defined, then on the mount phase is when it's transformed the React shadow tree into a host view tree, into something that now target a specific native. The host view are instance, exactly, is an instance of the host specific view, which are building blocks of the host view 3. The size and location of each host view are based on the layout metrics calculated with Yoga. The size and the location of each host view are based on layout metrics calculated with Yoga. And the style and content of each host view are based on information from React Shadow tree. And the style and content of each host are based on the information from React Shadow tree. So the layout metric is calculated with Yoga, which is the locations and the dimension. Okay. The location and the dimension is calculated with Yoga, which is the layout metrics, and the content and the style are derived from the React Shadow tree. And then, all right, so then once we hit enter, and we can now look at this. So here we will need to restore this. Let me actually restore this, right? Not sure if this is actually gonna work because, yeah, no problem. So clear that, right? And let me rerun this again. Expose star. Alright, started the metro and all that kind of stuff. And if I launch that into no, please. And if I install that into my emulator, right? Then I go to the counter. This is what happened. It throw me an error here. Text string must be rendered with a text component. Which component it is? In counter screen. Oh, that's right, because yep. I mean, it could render that. So if I save this, and now I show this properly, which is the pixel ratio from that. You can say, hey, this is the pixel ratio. So when I hit enter, all right, so this process is so freaking fast that it say, hey, let me evaluate the React logic here and create the React element tree, which is a plain JavaScript object that contain is, or that represent is what element should appear on the screen, and then this will be used by the Fabric, the rendering assistant, as part of the pipeline that is separate, that is split on 3 phases. So the commit, the render, the commit, and the mount. So on the render, which is evaluating is the render, the React logic into a React element tree. This generate is a JavaScript object, right? And then it takes that to generate the React shadow tree, which represent is the React host components tree to be mounted, right? So on the commit phase, now that it takes these 2 trees, and the React shadow tree is a C++ object, that now it promotes these 2 trees to be rendered as the next, or to be candidate, or to be promoted as the next tree to be mounted, right? Yeah, to be promoted to the next tree to be mounted. And here is when is the layout calculation happens, using Yoga to determine is the dimension and the position, and the style is now and the props are coming from JavaScript. And then on the mount phase with the React shadow tree, this C++ representation of the React shadow components, then it creates now the host view, which is the instance of native directive of those platforms, whether it's on iOS or Android. And in this case, all right, since we are using is view, text, and all that kind of stuff, it'll be quite interesting to know at least what is the directive of this view. So let me actually use Cloud here to ask that question. Okay. So what is the directive in iOS of the view, text, and touchable opacity? Okay, and touchable opacity. So what's the directive in iOS of the view, text, and touchable opacity? So what's the directive in iOS of the view, text, and touchable opacity of React native components? Okay, iOS maps to UI view. All right, that's interesting. To UI view. Mm-hmm. Okay, to the UI view. Interesting. UI kit. To UI label or UI text view. And the other is to UI bottom with custom opacity animation. Wrap children component makes them touchable. Provides opacity feedback on press. In UI bottom. View and controls. UI stack view, UI scroll view. UI control, UI bottom, UI day picker, and all that kind of stuff. Don't you have is a bottom? UI bottom here. Alright. Interesting. So it maps to UI label or UI view, UI label, and UI bottom instance. So now when I save this, we can actually see if those changes apply. So that's quite interesting. And this pipeline can happen in different phases or in different threads, may occur in different threads. The phases of rendering, the phases of rendering may occur on different threads. And the threads here, you have now the UI threads and the JavaScript threads. The UI thread is only the only thread that can manipulate host view, and the JavaScript thread is when the render phase as well as the layout are executed, right? So you might think, hey, this is something that I don't need to know, but the reality is that the more you know, the better off will be. The more you know, the better off will be for you. At least to understand what is the architecture and the inner mechanism that they're using behind the scenes. So, with that masterclass, right? Let's keep moving.
So this will be a const handle request permission, which will be an arrow function. So on its touchable opacity, let's give it an active opacity as well, so it's not so highlighted. Let's do 0.8, and on press.
Okay, this is more like from React. Request opacity here. We want to get rid of this. We don't want to the animation be so intense, so we can say it's opacity here. Style or opacity, active opacity of 0.8, right? So the opacity is now that intense, and on press, we want to now pass is this handle function, which is handle request permission. Again, this is more like the React convention, handle request permission. Okay, like that, you got it. Handle request permissions, and this is the function that we're gonna call here. Let me get rid of the pixel ratio, as well as the use router here. We don't need this, and now pass this handle permission request. So this is something that is being handled now and pass this props and functionality down to the host view tree, aka to the native UI bottom.
Handle request permission. So in this function, we want to do
we wanted
const
to now
result,
get that.
and we want to call this utility function that we created. So we want to await a register for push notification async. So it should be an asynchronous function. And let's just console log what happens.
On the result. So in this function, we're going to handle that, the request permission async, which is going to return now an async function, all right, which is optional. There is no need to pass anything right now. This is something coming from our, no, but exactly, this is the register for push notification async, that this function is going to evaluate, hey, it's going to register this push notification into a channel to show now a prompt to the user, at least starting from Android 8 and so on. And also let me check that you are now in a physical device, and let from there now trigger that, or a wait for that, which is request permission async. And if we have that, all right, we want to return is the status, or the existing status, right, which is something that is going to give us here. I want to await for this, which means that this is now an async function here. This is an async function here. I want you to await for this, and then assign that to a result. Okay. So once that is done, I want to now is console.log the result. Right. It's pretty much that's it.
Okay, so I want to simulate it, so I am expecting, so I'm getting null here because we're checking if we're on a device. If we're not on a device, let's return null. So I need
Exactly. So if we do this, expo notification, push notification, remote notification, functionality provided by expo notification, we'll be removing expo go in this case 53 instead use a development build for that. Exactly. We recommend you instead use a development build to avoid limitations. So if I go to my emulator here, and of course I'm gonna get null because that's not how things work. And I want to now navigate to this. This is supposed to work. Okay. Yeah, this is supposed to work. So if we take a look at Expogo, oh, they won't work. Interesting. Okay, they won't work in Expogo. Now it's working. All right, we are on the same network, and there you got it, right? So if we hit now the request permission, it will say, hey, this is granted, right? Which is quite fucked up.
to use my phone. Let's use this Android phone. So we'll do Pixel 7. Okay, so go to the counter. So now if I request permission, we're getting this permissions alert. So this alert is being triggered by our request permission async. So let's allow. And now you can see that this console log is telling me that my...
This is quite interesting because let me actually remove the notification here on Expo Go. Right, let's say, hey, settings here on Expo Go, Expo, and this is permission. But you say granted, do respaldo. Or if I say, hey, let's go to uninstall Expo, say Expo doesn't exist, right? And let me now reinstall Expo here. Okay, so when we open up this, and then we now clear here, and open up this again, and we load the bundle here, and we say, hey, request permission is already granted for that.
Permission status is granted. And it is fine to call this function like every time you want to schedule a push notification, because we've configured it in a way that it fails out early if we don't need to ask again. Then again, to be honest, you could even call request permission async loads of times because it will do nothing if you already requested permission. Alright, so now we have permission to do push notifications. Let me do the same on my iOS phone. Okay, let's open Expo Go and reload. Okay, we're doing push notifications. So this is iOS when we're requesting permissions. So I get the native iOS push permission prompt. I'm going to show you what happens if I say don't allow. So I do don't allow, and then now using permissions poll. So in this case, we are developing in Expo Go. And this will be a list of all the permissions that this app has asked. So in this case, we're only asked notification permission. So we can toggle this on. You can also toggle things off here. So it will be like camera permission, app tracking transparency, all the good stuff. So now, if I request permission again, it will say granted because I've toggled it on from the settings.
In-app notification.
Now let's schedule a notification. Alright, so I've switched this from my iOS simulator to the screen mirroring of my Android phone, so we could see how we're testing the push notifications. Right, so here, instead of handle request permission, let's call this schedule notification. And what we're doing is we're checking if we can schedule a notification. So if result is granted, and I'll do an else, so this is to do, but I'll do an else here as well. So I'll just do a quick alert that says unable to schedule notification, and enable the notification permission for Expo Go in settings. Actually, it might be worth, I didn't do this example, but it might be worth adding a if device. How do we do this here? Yeah, if device is device. So this is device from Expo device. So I just don't want to get this alert on the simulator. So if is so if it is a device, then we'll give the alert. Otherwise, we can just fail silently because it will be on a simulator, so we'll be the ones doing it. Alright, so if it is granted, we want to schedule a notification. So this will be asynchronous, so we'll await notifications. Oh, we should import notifications, so that's import star as notifications from Expo notifications. And we want to await notifications, schedule notification async. So this will schedule a local notification for ourselves on our device. And for the content, we can pass in a title. So this will be I'm a notification from your app. Let's add a little emoji here as well. And then the other config option that we're going to pass in is the trigger. So when do we want to trigger it? You can look at the docs. Actually, you can look at the docs now. So extra notifications. There we go. So the trigger. So you can do like you can pass in the amount of seconds. You can pass in a datetime. So we go to datetime. So this will be the input. There we go. So you can do a date, you can do a time interval, you can do a daily push notification, a weekly, a yearly, or like a particular second or a particular timestamp. So look at the docs, it's actually quite flexible when you can schedule it. But in our case, let's just trigger it after 5 seconds, so we can see it immediately. Alright, so we should probably rename our button as well. So let's call this schedule notification. Lovely. So now, let's see, I don't have any settings. Get rid of this. Okay, lovely. So no notifications. So I'm going to schedule notifications. So one thing to note is that foreground and background notifications are treated differently. So when your app is open, your background notification isn't going to end up in your notifications bar. So I'm going to press the button and immediately background the app. So press the button, background the app, and then open the notifications bar. So I'm hoping I'll get a notification here. There you go, I'm a notification from your app. So when I open this, it will open the app. And it will work the same on iOS, I promise. So yeah, so the important thing I guess to note here is, like I said, if you have your app open, this will be a foreground notification. And you can add handling for foreground notifications, so you can look at the documentation for that. But by default, they will show. So if I do schedule notification here, and then just look at my notification bar and wait for 5 seconds, nothing happens. So nothing happens because my app is literally open here.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. So this is why it looks an.
But this is if you want to now create is this schedule notifications, which is, hey, after I get that result, I want to check if the result is granted, right? I want to check if the result is granted. I want to check if the result is granted. Alright. I want to check if the result is granted, and if it is, then I want to now call that schedule notification async. Call that notification schedule async, which is something that we have from the import everything as notification. Import everything as notification from the expo notifications center, and then you say, hey, notification, give me is this schedule async, schedule notification async, right? And then I can pass some sort of options here, which is, hey, what will be the content of this? The title. Hey, I'm a notification. I am a notification from your app. I am a notification from your app. And the other is the trigger. When you want to do this, you want to schedule this to trigger after an X amount of time.
Let's just trigger it after 5 seconds, so we can see it immediately. Alright, so should probably rename our button as well. So let's call this schedule notification as well. So let's call it.
So if we call this notification, it will of course now show on here on our device. So for example here, and then we say, hey, there must be a more convenient way to actually is go to the forefront. And then we immediately go back. So after 5 seconds, it's because push notifications only works in devices. So for example, if I do this and then immediately go back, after 5 seconds, I'm supposed to receive that notification, which here I don't get it.
Aló. Aló, aló.
Hola Carlos, ¿cómo estás?
Muy bien, ¿y tú, Emilio, cómo estás ahí?
Bien, bien. Que no sé qué, bueno, o si podemos arreglar ese inconveniente ahorita de las notificaciones, porque
Ya.
me llegan las de Global Logic, pero no las del Teams.
Claro. Dame un segundito. Dame un segundo, por favor.